Now, in order to change the text of a selected element using jQuery, there's two ways of going about this. One is you can simply say, select an element, then .text, and inside the parentheses, you'll add the new text that you want it to say. So this will change our hello to a goodbye. As we mentioned before, when we use jQuery to select an HTML element, it selects all of the elements that match that selector on your web page. So if we were to say .text on the buttons, then when we refresh our page, you can see that every single button gets its text updated by simply selecting for all the elements that match this criteria, and then we're using the .text method to change the text that's inside those buttons, which is this part here. Now, if you remember, when we learnt how to do this using plain old vanilla JavaScript, we also had something called inner HTML. And using inner HTML, we were able to not just update text, but we were also able to add HTML. But as we're using jQuery, it's a little bit shorter. So it's simply .html. And inside here, we can add some tags. Say, for example, if we wanted to add the em tag to make our text emphasized, or rather italicized. Now, when we update our website, you can see that the HTML is also taken into consideration because we're using the .html method instead of simply the .text method, which will interpret everything in between the quotation marks as pure text and ignores all of the HTML tags. Now, by this point, you would have noticed that most of the things that you do with jQuery are implemented using methods, and we're accessing it through the dot notation. Now, remember how when we were learning about methods and functions, we used it a lot to shorten our code and reduce repetition. Well, this is pretty much how jQuery works. If you take a look at the library, then you'll notice that jQuery is completely written in JavaScript, but it has all of these methods that shorten the code that we need to write and makes working with JavaScript to create our websites much, much quicker, much easier, and reduces repetitive strain injury from typing so much. So I hope that you also realize that without understanding how vanilla JavaScript works, then jQuery just seems like complete magic. So it's really important that you needed to get a good foundation in JavaScript before we start introducing you to essentially what most web developers will use when they're writing JavaScript, which is doing it through jQuery or another library. I hope that by this point you've already realized that this library can make your life as a developer so much easier with less things to type and more intuitive syntax. But in the next lesson, we're going to dig into jQuery even further, and we're going to learn how we can manipulate attributes using jQuery. So for all of that, stay tuned. I'll see you on the next lesson.